Hello friends, how are you all? So in the previous episode, we saw how Barry, who had now become the Flash and the fastest man alive due to a shock from a particle accelerator explosion, is the one we're going to see more of in today's story.
My name is Barry Allen, and I am the fastest man alive. When I was a child, I saw my mother killed by something impossible. My father went to prison for her murder. Then an accident made me the impossible. To the outside world, I'm an ordinary forensic scientist. But secretly, with the help of my friends at Star Labs, I fight crime and find other metahumans like me. And one day I will find who killed my mother and get justice for my father. I am the Flash.
Episode 2 begins in the western part of South Central City, where we are shown a building on fire and many people trapped inside. Just then, Barry, following Cisco's instructions, enters the building and saves everyone one by one. Caitlin also arrives, calls Barry back, and scolds both Barry and Cisco because Barry still had no control over his speed, and his life could have been lost in that fierce fire too. Barry gets a call from Joe about a robbery involving millions at a gun shop somewhere else. Barry also arrives at the scene where, according to Barry, there were 6 thieves based on the shoe prints found, but according to the CCTV camera footage, only one person was visible. Once again, no one believes Barry's words. Then Barry brings the evidence found at the robbery scene to the lab for checking, where, finding no one else around, he uses his own speed. Suddenly, Barry feels exhausted, and just then, Iris arrives and asks Barry to accompany her to Stag Industries, because Iris, working at the cafe and studying journalism, needed to cover a breaking news story for her article about Dr. Simon Stagg receiving the Man of the Year award from the university. Right after Simon's thank you speech, some robbers wearing masks arrive and start demanding jewelry and money from all the present public, where the security guard tries to intervene but gets shot by all the robbers acting together. Just then, Barry uses his powers to save the security guard and chases after the robbers. But suddenly, Barry feels dizzy again and faints right there where, after some time, when Barry regains consciousness, Iris takes him inside the hall where, during the robbery incident investigation, Joe learns from the guard that an unknown force saved his life, which Joe brings Barry aside and says, "You don't need to get into such dangers. From now on, you won't do any foolishness that endangers your life." On the other hand, Caitlin becomes even more upset upon hearing the news of Barry becoming unconscious because she was very angry that these changes happening in Barry's body were happening right under her nose, and Barry never informed Caitlin or Cisco about these changes before. Then, to understand the changes happening in Barry's body, Dr. Harrison conducts speed-related tests on Barry, where it's discovered from Barry's report that his glucose levels had dropped. Now, after using a lot of energy, Barry needs to adjust his diet chart, meaning he needs to consume even more calorie-rich food. Meanwhile, Joe, searching for Barry, heads to his lab but doesn't find Barry there. Just then, Joe notices a Star Lab t-shirt on a chair, realizing where Barry might be, and reaches Star Lab, scolding Barry, thinking that Barry has been trying to play hero, lately influenced by Dr. Harrison's words. But Joe didn't want that because he deeply cared for Barry and didn't want to lose him. Hearing Joe's concern, Barry tells him not to try to act like his father, which deeply hurts Joe, and he leaves. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Dr. Simon Stagg's bodyguard is shown planning with the masked robber who had recently stolen jewelry, whose name is Danton Black. From their conversation, it becomes clear that Java, Dr. Simon's bodyguard, and Danton Black are colluding, and together they plan to kill Dr. Simon, where Danton, angry, demands the personal keys to Dr. Simon's house from Java. Java dislikes Danton's dominating behavior and decides to leave after punching Danton. Just then we see Danton starting to clone himself, and in a few moments more Dantons appear and together they kill Java right there. The next morning, news of Java's murder arrives, where Joe arrives and brings some found evidence to Barry for checking, and Joe himself goes to meet Dr. Simon Stagg at Stagg Industries. While Joe is in the middle of questioning Dr. Simon, suddenly Danton Black also arrives and starts shooting at them. On the other hand, upon checking the evidence found from the murder scene, Barry discovers a cell sample that was creating identical cells, just as there's a commotion in the department which informs Barry that all officers are heading to Stagg Industries because there's shooting happening there. Remembering this, Barry realizes Joe is also there at the moment, so Barry also heads to Stagg Industries as the Flash to save him. There, Joe sees Danton making his clones. Just then, Barry arrives there and safely evacuates Joe from that hall, heading back to confront Danton. Because Danton, with several clones at once, was attacking Barry, Barry couldn't withstand the assault and escapes, arriving at Star Labs, where Caitlin is shocked again because Barry's wounds were healing on their own. There, Barry's suit also had Danton's blood on it, which he decides to keep under observation, so Dr. Harrison explains about Danton Black being a biogeneticist whose specialty was cloning and creating new organs to replace old ones. Caitlin reveals that it was Dr. Simon who stole Danton's discovery and ousted him from his company, which is probably why Danton Black wants to kill Dr. Simon. Now, about their cloning powers, it's suspected that Danton might also be a meta-human affected by the particle accelerator explosion, hearing which Barry leaves disheartened because he starts to believe Joe's words that he isn't a hero and that Barry could never defeat these odd metahumans, while Dr. Harrison tries to console him, but Barry leaves, and on the other side, the truth about Danton is revealed. Joe advises Dr. Simon to beef up his security, but Dr. Simon refuses any help from Joe. Just then, Dr. Harrison Wells arrives, indicating that he and Dr. Simon know each other very well. After a while, Dr. Harrison and Joe talk amongst themselves, where Joe advises Dr. Harrison to stay away from Barry, but Dr. Harrison suggesting to Joe that Barry is a capable young man, and if you don't appreciate him, maybe one day he'll admit defeat because you're like a father to him. Why do you think only you care about him? I care too. He's like my own child to me. On the other side, when Barry meets Iris, Iris talks about the deeds of Flash, Barry's Superman-like version, unaware of Barry's real identity. Hearing praises of himself as Flash makes Barry feel good. Just then Barry receives a call from Caitlin asking him to immediately come to Star Labs. Upon arriving at Star Labs, Barry sees that there's a clone of Danton Black there. Caitlin had created the clone using Danton's blood found on Barry's suit and placed it in a protein gel. The clone doesn't engage in any activity as explained by Dr. Harrison and Caitlin to Barry. The clone won't perform any activity without Danton's presence because its brain only functions for receiving commands, meaning no clone of Danton Black will do anything until Danton Blake gives the order. And if we stop the real Danton alone, then all clones will automatically stop, and the only way to identify the real Danton is his exhaustion, as managing many clones would require Danton to expend a lot of energy. So, the most exhausted clone is the real Danton. While these discussions are happening, Danton's clone suddenly becomes active, indicating Danton has arrived at Star Labs. Joe fires his gun, telling Barry it's okay if you want to help people, just take care of yourself, and now don't delay any longer. Go catch Danton. They all together guess that Danton might now be at Stagg Industries, where all of their guesses turn out to be correct. And Barry finds Danton Black at Stagg Industries, where he was about to attack Dr. Simon. But at the last moment, Barry, as the Flash arrives and tells Dr. Simon to stay safely in his office, then confronts Danton. Identifying the exhausted Danton, Barry catches him and wants to hand him over to the police, but there Danton chooses suicide over surrendering to the police. Then we see Joe bringing Barry his favorite dinner and telling Barry that together they'll exonerate his father from the false accusation of his mother's murder, where Barry also apologizes for his rudeness to Joe. So at the end of the episode, we see Dr. Simon and Dr. Harrison together, where Simon, talking about Flash, talks to Dr. Harrison about controlling him. Dr. Harrison once again stands up from his wheelchair and, stabbing Simon, says he can't share Flash with anyone. And with this amazing twist, the episode also ends. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can see the next part of this. Thanks for watching.